Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Reinvent Legal Business Series number 2. As you know, for those of you that have joined us for others in this series, we're exploring from a global perspective new themes that have emerged and those that have changed or expanded in our new legal ecosystem. So welcome back to those of you that are coming back, and welcome to those of you for whom this is your first event with us. We're offering these sessions as live webinars, as we are here, as you can see us right now, but we're also making these available as a podcast as part of the Legalpreneurs Sandbox podcast series. So you'll be able to watch or listen at your convenience, whatever works best for you. Today, we're discussing the topic of the new legal intern, and it's been a very, very popular topic. We'll be exploring things like the objectives of internship programs, the evolving world of virtual internships, the changing role of work experience and its relevance to internships as well, the opportunities for collaboration between legal educators and industry through internships, and a whole bunch more as well. I'm going to be asking a whole bunch of questions of this truly amazing panel, and it's an international panel that we have today from Australia and the USA. Welcome, Tom. Welcome, Sam. Welcome, Sandee, and welcome, Sam. So we have two Sams on the podcast today. So you're going to hear me say Sam G or Sam K just to identify them, and you will be able to as well. So let's kick off with probably the best place to start, and asking you if you can just share, who you are, your title, where you're located, and what your organisation does. And Tom, I'm going to ask you if you could start us off in the whole session by talking with us about that.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast today. I'm Tom. I'm the co-founder of a company called Forage. We've only just rebranded in the last 2 weeks. Over the last 3 years, we have been known as InsideSherpa. And what we do, so forgive me in advance if I interchangeably use InsideSherpa and Forage as I learn to adjust to the new name. But what we do at Forage is we partner with large companies, and in particular, I guess relevant to this conversation, law firms, to create free open access online training courses or virtual experience programs for law students to build critical skills to prepare them for the world of private practice. So our courses simulate what it's like to work at our partner companies. So our virtual experience program with Mallesons, for example, students are kind of navigating like fictional legal scenarios, which are designed to allow them to dip their toes in the water of what the real world looks like. I'm based here in San Francisco in California. Our team is, we're a team of 35 full-time at the moment. And we just reached our 1,000,000th course enrollment in the last couple of weeks, which we're very excited about. But yeah, that's who we are.
Fantastic. And I've got to get used to that now as well, Tom. Forage, right? I'm going to say it many times. So forgive me if I say the other name that I won't even say again. Now, Sam Garner, Tom kind of started the intro for you in a way. So over to you.
You did. Thank you, Tom. I am Sam Garner. I work for Mallesons, which is a commercial law firm headquartered in Asia. I've been in graduate recruitment for over 23 years now, and the last 19 years being with Mallesons. Most recently, I look after their graduate strategy and learning programs. And when we talk about strategy, we do talk about things like the virtual experience program, which is probably one of our core programs, as well as we do working with First Nation students. We're looking at technology and also really obviously the Asia piece because of where we're headquartered. That's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Sam. So we're going from one Sam to the next Sam. Sam Kilpatrick, same to you.
Thanks, Terri. My name's Sam Kilpatrick. Obviously, I'm a final year law student at Monash University and the paralegal coordinator at Annika Legal. Anika is a Melbourne-based legal practice and social justice organisation which aims to provide access to justice to Victorians by connecting those in need of legal help with law students who need practical legal experience. Specifically, we take law students from 4 major Victorian universities and provide them with remote, flexible, and really hands-on legal experience. So it's definitely not administrative or reception work. We definitely focus on making sure that they get hands-on legal experience. What makes us different is that as a not-for-profit, our clients and students are at the forefront of everything we're doing. And our role is really just to facilitate their learning. Our student interns are the public face of Anika and the only members of our team who really actually interact with the clients themselves. So they get real ownership and case control, while also getting the benefit of regular feedback from myself and supervising lawyers. We've recently actually just serviced our 200th client, which is very exciting.
And I was just about to prod you about that. It's a fantastic one as well. Thank you, Sam. And Sandee, we've kind of come from the States, gone through Australia, and now back to the States again with you, Sandee Magliozzi.
So, hi, I'm Sandee Magliozzi. I'm the Associate Dean for Experiential Learning and a clinical professor at Santa Clara University School of Law. We're based here in California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. And my role as a faculty member is to teach critical lawyering skills, but probably most pertinent to this is my role as an associate dean is to oversee all of our curricular experiential learning components. And that includes externships, skills courses, clinics. And we're really trying to use those experiences for students to be able to leverage, to have the skill set and the experiences they need to hit the ground running and bridge the gap to practice.
And Sandee, in the interest of full disclosure, I should say that I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with you on your externship program in the States, and that was certainly a wonderful experience for me, and I hope for the students as well.
We're very fortunate to have you.
And so thank you very much, folks. It's great to hear your background, and I think this diversity of background is obviously going to be wonderful for our discussion today. But we've used a few terms here, and so I'm wondering if we might start in terms of explaining all of this with a few definitions in a way. And Sandee, I'm going to address this question to you, and I appreciate that even the words themselves may have slightly different definitions in different places. But how do you in the States see or view the difference, if any, between externship programs and internship programs and clinics?
Sure. It's a bit of a muddle, and it depends whether you're speaking to folks inside a law school or outside of a law school. Outside of the law school, internships and externships tend to be a little bit muddled. Traditionally, in just the corporate world, not in the legal world, externships were a slightly less formal, shorter sort of engagement. That's actually not true in law school. In law school, it's the reverse. So an internship is an opportunity for students generally paid to go out and work for a legal firm or for a corporation and to do work for them. In an externship is something that actually has academic credit attached to it. So not all internships, although they are valuable, good experiences and work experience, and students learn things in them, rise to the level of academic credit. And the American Bar Association has put some stipulations over what qualifies as an externship or field placement, as they're often called, or a clinic, and I'll come to clinics later. But for us, it is really about training and learning versus the work. So both internships and externships include both. Often, many organizations that offer internship programs are robust and also offer training. But it's really about the learning. And so the ABA talks about having substantial experiences for lawyering skills that would be the same as if you were working with a client or as if you're working for a client. And the really critical difference is the opportunity for reiterative performance and feedback. And so sometimes if you're doing work, of course you're getting feedback if you're drafting in an internship, but this is really about the opportunity for skills building and students to learn. And so it's this opportunity to take that feedback, integrate it, and do it again to do that skill. In the United States, until very recently, you were not allowed to get paid and get academic credit. And the ABA finally changed that rule. Many companies, particularly here in the Valley, were concerned about risk management in our Federal Labor Standards Act. And so now you can do both at the school's discretion. So Santa Clara is a school that allows you to get paid and get academic credit, but only about 18% of US law schools actually allow you to both get paid and get credit. And that also stems at the difference of internship and externship. It's this idea that if you're doing work for an organization and getting paid for it, they actually dictate the nature of that work and what it is. And what we've done at Santa Clara is we just simply have a memorandum of understanding with our partners about sort of what the difference is and the expectations of progression on a continuum of learning and exposure. So if I ask you to do document protection and you're an intern, you may end up doing that most of your summer. If you're an extern, you might do that and that's fine, but I also expect you to get exposure and other opportunities and sit down and talk to the clients as well as with the different supervising attorneys.
Yep. And clinics, Sandee, how do they fit into the picture with all of this?
Forgive me, thank you. Clinics are internal, traditionally, experiences at a law school, and they are direct client representation and advising with faculty supervisors. So both clinic and externships have a contemporaneous course component. So in addition to getting academic credit, there's a requirement that you are actually taking a course with a faculty member in conjunction to that. So in the case of an extern, a student is supervised by a licensed attorney and a faculty member who's teaching the class. In the case of a clinic, it is a faculty member who's also a licensed attorney who is supervising the work. And traditionally, those tend to be social justice, nonprofit, public interest type of clinics. More and more law schools are expanding into entrepreneurial law and a variety of more corporate and transactional arenas. But their main purpose when they were created was about service, not so much about training, although they provided good training opportunities.
Thanks a lot for that. And for those that are not familiar with the US legal education system, law is a postgraduate degree. So we would be familiar with the JD model, obviously, here in this part of the world in Australia, but there is no compulsory practical legal training component, if you like, to the education. So, Sam, I wanted to flip to you, if I may, with those comments in relation to Australia, but I guess add into this other term that we also use, which is clerkships. Yet another term could mean the same thing or something different, and you're about to tell us.
Yes, and funny actually, Sandee, I was thinking probably Sam K might be better at answering this from a practical experience, but yes, I mean, externships don't tend to be part of the Australian model. We do clerkships, and obviously we can only hire law students, so that's normally in the penultimate year. The only thing I could actually think of that was probably within the externship model is when you do your PLT to a College of Law or whichever provider you do that with, and you have to do your 60-day work experience component. So that was really the model I could see. But most firms or most commercial law firms tend to have the clerkship model, which is that penultimate year program, and then straight into graduate. And the clerkship is fantastic because it's a bit, and we'll talk about it more in detail later, but around like the virtual experience programs or any internships, it's about giving you an insight. It's about you making an informed decision as to whether this is the career you want, this is the type of work you want, is this the type of organisation, etc. So we probably hire 95% of our graduates through our clerkship program, and that's not because we think it's a better model. It's just that most people tend to in Australia do that clerkship program.
Absolutely. Tom, I'm going to come to you in a sec, but Sam K, as Sam G mentioned, Annika kind of has a somewhat unique or new and evolving model around this. So tell us a little bit about that and how that fits into all of these definitions as well, if you could.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Sam G hit the nail on the head by saying that it's a little bit muddled within Australia, and externship terminology isn't super common. So we are run in coordination and partnership with the universities. So we just chat with all the universities. We're currently with ACU, Melbourne, Deakin and Swinburne. And we chat to them about what they need to meet their professional practice requirements. And so that we make sure that what we build works for students, and so that they do get not only their academic requirements met, but they also get the experience they need. So that's what I think is the most important part. So it kind of comes down to substance over form in regards to all of this terminology. What are you actually giving? So at the end of the day, we're looking to make sure that, you know, they are getting not only just the credit, but they're also getting that involvement within the business to know what it's actually like to be a member of that organisation, not to do just one specific role. And that's why at Anika, we encourage all of our students to engage in design thinking workshops, innovation, helping with the marketing team to write articles about the legal areas that we specialise in. And I think that's what is most crucial.
So, Sam, it sounds like with Anika, the exposure is obviously to the practice of law, but there's exposure to the business of law as well. Is that a fair comment?
Definitely. As a startup, we really want to encourage that kind of mindset within the students. We're not just having them on board so that we can tick some boxes with them. That wouldn't be doing both us and them a disservice. We're still growing, and there's something you can learn from everyone. And you know, halfway through all of our student internships, we chat to them and we say, okay, where are we going? What are you enjoying? What type of work do you find most engaging? And we kind of work with them to say, okay, well, what further stuff can we do on top of your casework? So the casework is the bare minimum, and then we see where we can expand within the organisation for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, just on this question again of framing out these definitions, you folks have chosen the term internship, so I'm sure that it means something to you and probably all of these features, but tell us a little bit how you defined it, why you use that term.
Well, that's actually interesting, Terri, because we've tried to move away from the term internship for the reason that what we do, I guess, got conflated with actual internships. And in Australia, that wasn't so much of an issue, but in the US, it certainly was an issue. So as a reminder, what we do is we upload these like online courses, which are free and open access to any students, and they contain hypothetical, you know, scenarios and tasks for students to navigate so they can understand what it's like to work at our partner firms. But it's not real work, and they're not getting paid. It's like, ultimately, it's like, you know, it sits at the intersection of like education and work readiness. And so when we started using the word virtual internship, which wasn't a term commonly used in Australia, it made sense. But when we came to the US and started creating programs with big firms over here, like Latham & Watkins, White & Case, Wilson Sonsini, it got really confusing for students because there was already this concept of virtual internship, which was basically you would work in a remote environment, do actual work and get paid for it. So we've, for lack of a better term, we've now carved, and to make things more confusing for everyone else, we now have carved out like a unique I guess like a unique work experience area for ourselves, and we call them virtual experience programs. So that's probably the only thing I would kind of add into this question around the different definitions for the different opportunities that law students do have at their disposal.
Tom, you're making it harder for all of us with another term.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
but there's some others floating out there, and one came through, in fact, in a comment in the Q&A was, you know, we've also heard the terms integrated work experience, and there's a whole bunch of them there. But I guess at the end of the day, and listening to what you folks were saying, there are some pretty common objectives, right? And I guess the objectives are perhaps common but slightly different also, whether you're looking at it from the perspective of the person, the provider, if you like, of the opportunity versus the person taking the opportunity and running with it. So, Sam G, I wanted to ask you this question specifically on that, in drawing out some of these threads. Where do you see, or what does your firm most want to get out of an internship program? And folks, I'm going to use that term very broadly now, just not to make it even more confusing. What does your firm want to get out of it, and what do you hope that your interns will take away from it? So the two sides of the coin, if you like.
Yeah, and I will talk about internships versus, as Tom mentioned, the virtual experience program, which is a little bit different. But from an internship, or what we call clerkship perspective, as I mentioned before, from my perspective, it's about transparency. It's about opening up the firm, making sure people have a realistic picture of the type of work we do, the culture, what the career opportunities are, etc. On the flip side, for me, with students coming in, I always my biggest hope is that they keep an open mind. Use the opportunity to look at different types of work. When you study, you're aware of certain areas of law because that's part of your course. You don't come across projects, you don't come across banking and finance, yet those are incredible areas, especially in a growth market like this. So, we often struggle. We all say to people, we'd like you to go into projects, and they're like, oh, I just don't know what that is. And we just say, well, renewable energy, or think about wind farms or different things. But so for me, it's that. The other one is with banking and finance. I haven't studied commerce. Well, 70% of our banking and finance lawyers did arts law. So please don't worry. It's about going in, trying to absorb as much as you can, trying to look at all the different areas that you perhaps don't have a knowledge of, so that, again, you're making that informed decision. But really, yeah, we just ask people to throw themselves into it. We only give real work. And I know we're very lucky that we're in that position, but we can do that. But again, it's just really making sure that people have a realistic experience. And that's what we strive for with the internships. And this year's obviously been challenging because we had virtual internships, as in proper virtual internships, where we had to make the clerkship virtual. So that was a really interesting method, because usually the internship is a lot about being in the office, getting to know people, going into the coffee room and seeing what the vibe is. So trying to bring that to life virtually was unique. And thankfully we'd had experience with our virtual experience program and with Forage. So we had some things, and we took a lot of what we'd learned there and weave that into the virtual program. But yeah, for me, it's all about transparency.
And Tom, Sam G's mentioned, but for Forage and the virtual internship programs that you offer, the pandemic has really given kind of a real focus on the sort of work that you do. So, when you set up, and I guess even now in the current environment that we find ourselves, what did you see as the common objectives for and different objectives perhaps for the folks that would be taking your programs and for Forage itself?
Yeah, I mean, probably like most founders that you come across, like the reason why we built Forage was like one of those, it was just from one of those things, like what did I wish I had when I went to law school? So I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but I went and studied law at ANU and did a combined undergrad degree with arts, and then went off and became a solicitor at Mallesons and then later at Mallesons. And ultimately, I didn't come necessarily from a family of like bankers or lawyers or accountants or anything like that. And I found that while I enjoyed parts of my legal education in terms of its ability to prepare me for the world of work or give me the tools and resources to understand where my skills and interests were actually aligned with, it didn't do a particularly great job. And so when we built the product, it was, well, what do I wish I had when I was in law school that would give me like a really good understanding of what career was suited to me. And, I'm a big believer that, of course, there's like a bunch of information out there that students can consume already, but it was this idea of, well, no, like if I'm sitting at my desk and working as project finance lawyer at Kingwood Mallesons, like I don't want to be told, and all due respect, Kingwood Mallesons, I don't want to be told you'll be working on like cutting edge cross-border transactions with like multiple stakeholders. Like for me, I couldn't really like sink my teeth into what that meant. And so what our courses are designed to do is like, okay, so you're working on these cutting edge transactions, like what is it that you actually be doing, and give you the skills, and most importantly, like the confidence to feel like you can apply to what are sometimes like very intimidating law firms. So that was, I guess, like as opposed to like externships or kind of clinical placements or clerkships, which are just capped in number, it was like, how do you, it's not an academic experience, but how do you allow every student to have the opportunity to kind of at least be able to like partially experience what it's like to work in these different firms before they make a major career decision. And so that was the objective and remains the objective of Forage today.
And so far you've had 1 million people agree with you, so that's not a bad strike rate, Tom. Yeah. Sorry, Samji. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say to actually bring what Tom said to life. We've had now 17,000 students go through our 4 various programs, and we've had a reiteration of we did an Australian sort of virtual experience program, and now we've gone global, but across the board. And to be honest, previously we had, you try and go to as many law schools as you possibly can, but we probably went physically to 15, maybe 20. Now there are 48 law schools in Australia. When we did the virtual experience program, within a week we had touched someone at every one of those 48 law schools. So the reach, and for us to realise that, clerkships are often only open to people that live within close proximity to a city, or where, we have an office, say, and I'm not just saying us, but other commercial law firms. So it really limits your audience. It gives you no diversity, and it just sort of pigeonholes who you can take, whereas the virtual experience program has just opened up our reach and our conversation, and people that would never have even perhaps heard about a commercial law firm now can have a go. So it's the most incredible tool for organisations, as well as, obviously for students, to have that insight. And what I love is, people can do the Kingwood Mallesons one, they can go and do White and Case, they can go and do Linklaters. It's not just about you, it's about actually making sure that the student again has that transparency, can make an informed decision. I don't want to hire anyone that's not going to enjoy the type of work we do or our culture. So it's really, really important to put as many touch points in front of that before you have to make that decision about where you're going to start your career. You want to have as much exposure as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to come back on a couple of other points on the virtual internship. So bear with me on that. But I also want to pick up a question and come to you, Sam K, if I may, please, because you folks have really, in effect, not just rolled with the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment with the pandemic, but had set up the work that you're doing with students in a way that it could be done virtually anyway, right? So I'm going to read you the question, Sam, because it touches on those points specifically. What are the pros and cons, the new norms in handling internships as a result of the pandemic? And the other bit of the question is, on average, how many folks do you take, and what's the criteria to be able to do your program?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the current crisis, pandemic, unprecedented situation, whichever label you want to go with, it really threw a lot of things up into the air. And we were so lucky to be in the position that we were, that the majority of our organisation had been working remotely prior to the pandemic. And that's something that meant that we could train interns remotely as well. It's something that we put a lot of focus in making sure that what we were providing was accessible to everyone. And when you're giving students real clients and real people, it's obviously not enough to say, okay, come into the office 1 day a week. That's just not viable when, if you send out an email, 4 p.m. on a Friday and you're only working every Friday, you haven't really provided the client the type of justice that they really need for it to be accessible for them. And so by making it all remote and online, we've managed to give them an experience which allows them to really take that ownership on board, which I think is really important. As to what Annika's doing, we're doing about 20 interns at a time, based on caseload and based on the university partnerships. So I saw the specific question involved something about criteria. That would involve obviously having to be a partnership university, because we do want to make sure that everyone gets the credit they deserve, and does tick the boxes officially. So if your university isn't partnered with Annika, we would definitely encourage, lobbying the student services and whatnot, saying this looks like an organisation that we can really get behind, and it's the type of experience, hands-on, that we would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So if they're not working with you, to kind of maybe approach their law schools and see if that's an opportunity or possibility as well. Which brings me back to the world of virtual internships, Tom. And just as I was listening to Sam and you, and how you were describing that earlier, it seems that, there's at least 5 areas, there's probably more, at least 5 areas where the virtual internship model stands out. One of them is access, the other one is diversity. And I think you in particular mentioned those, Sam G, a lot. But I guess the other 3 that come to mind for me is this evolving kind of trend, I guess, of multidisciplinary practices. Seeing obviously in places like the States, there's difficulties still in terms of regulation in doing that. In Australia, it's been fairly open for a while, but we're seeing increasingly in the press that move towards law firms now offering a whole bunch of other additional services apart from giving legal advice. And I guess, that focus on real life experience, and as Sam has just kind of underscored, how much we're now really focusing on this whole idea of virtual legal practice, and that's obviously going to expand as well. And it seems that the way that you folks have your virtual internships, they're not just legal. They do speak to the access and the diversity issue. They do speak to upskilling in a multitude of different disciplines. But they also give kind of real life experiences as well. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think sometimes people perhaps are thinking about virtual programs 10 or 15 years ago, to the extent they even existed then, versus the sort of platform that we're talking about now.
Yeah, and I think kind of going back to what I said earlier, we just realized early on that, like 90% of your job, and, I'd had personal experience with this, given that I was a solicitor for a number of years, like 90% of your job, you're using digital tools as it is. So, I feel like law firms don't get enough credit for how tech enabled they already are. And of course, there's like a lot of room for improvement. I'm sure everyone on here would agree with that. But, like lawyers, are technologists already. And so I guess like that simple realization was like, well, why can't you replicate, the work environment through this like digital, through our digital environment, through our digital courses. And I think like a lot of things have happened, like even since we launched our first course with KWN coming up 3 years ago, like so much has changed in 3 years in the practice of law. So if you look at our Clifford Chance program, which runs in the UK, like for those who don't know, like Clifford Chance is a magic circle firm. It's like a big, I think it's perceived, or at least historically, it's probably perceived as like a big old conservative dinosaur, for lack of a better expression. Hopefully they're not hearing this, but when you actually look at their program, what I love about it, it's reflective of how the practice of law has changed so much. So in their program, they've got 3 specific programs. One program is focused on climate change law, one is on cybersecurity law, and the other is on human rights law, which are like three areas that I don't think, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you would have seen any law firm advertise as like, key practice groups or like industry, like the industry experts in any of those areas. And so when students hear that the world of law is changing and the practice of law is changing, like, again, it just goes back. It's hard to get your teeth into like, well, what do you mean by that? What does that actually look like? And what these courses do in this like digital environment, like, enables them to experience that. Even looking at the KWM program, like one of the modules is like learning how to use smart contract technology to automate the condition precedents in a sale and purchase agreement, right? Like, 10 years ago, I don't think there would be a lawyer in the world who knew what a smart contract is. And now it's like mainstream at a firm like KWM. And these programs are a really good way to kind of showcase how that's evolved. And as you've touched on there, Terri, like, showcase that in a way which is open and accessible to any student, and kind of breaking down those big obstacles, those big barriers that the bulk of the student population had to face, 10, 15 years ago, when the only way to get experience was to get, a coveted clerkship, which, they handed out to like 5% of the population. So it's certainly like an exciting, there are a lot of things in the world which seem to be deteriorating and, being turned upside down. But I think for legal education and access to opportunities, like, there's never been a more exciting time. And that's certainly like where we've tried to position ourselves at Forage.
Tom, is the other part of that as well? Because I'm thinking about things like, other critical skills now, things like understanding data and data analytics, and a few of those sort of, I guess, more obvious ones. The benefit of a platform like your own is that you can take those programs from consultancy firms or folks that are real specialists in that area. I mean, I know it seems to be out of industry, but increasingly it's within the industry now as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, we run programs with Accenture, KPMG, BCG, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, GE, Citibank. And so we find that, like, law, if we look at law students, like, law students know that just understanding law or just the knowledge of law doesn't, in itself, doesn't prepare you to become a great practitioner. Like, you really, like, you've seen some firms in Australia that have literally repositioned themselves as a consulting firm. So if you look at Mallesons, for example, they've got, they bought their consulting, they acquired that consulting division a number of years ago, and they have like a division within Minters, which is a consulting division. And so, I think what we see in terms of the user behavior of law students who enroll in our programs is they're not just doing the KWM program, the Latham's program, they're doing the BCG program, they're doing the KPMG data science program, and they're upskilling in a multidisciplinary way to improve their employability, but also to prepare them for the world of work as a legal practitioner, where being a legal practitioner is like a lot more than just telling someone what the law is or isn't. And it's great to see. I think I mean, I don't have a good benchmark because I wasn't around like 30, 40 years ago, but I suspect that lawyers are far more kind of well-rounded and less in their niche today than what they were 20, 30, 40 years ago.
And I want to pick up that point, Tom, because I think it is an important one, and it really is, to my mind, one of the hallmarks of how much is changing in the legal marketplace in particular. But Sam G, let me ask this question of you first, and Sandee, I'm going to come to you next. It used to be, when folks were applying to a firm like your own, or any firm really, that it started and it ended with academics. And the question that I want to ask you is, given the plethora of experiences that they can now gain, how important is it when it comes to the decision making for a firm like your own? And Sandee, I'm going to ask you that question as well in relation to the States, in employing someone. Is it just about the academics, or is some of this other knowledge critically important too?
It's such an interesting question, because I had to write something yesterday and they asked me how recruitment had changed in the firm since I joined, which was 19 years ago. When I first arrived, it was very much about academics, and I came from the UK and I'd worked in investment banking and fund management. I used to work for Fidelity Investment. So coming to a law firm and then coming to Australia was just totally foreign to me. And I arrived and it was still pretty traditional in the sense of you looked at academics, you looked at the top law schools, and it was quite easy. You just probably look at that 20%. After a couple of years, I realised that model was not working, and also the industry was changing, the firm was changing, and we just got rid of the academic cutoff. So we have no GPA cutoff. We introduced unconscious bias reviewing, so every application has to have 2 reads, and we introduced questions, so we could see people's communication skills, and the academics went to the back of the application. So you're still going to get talk with the firm that you need a certain level of academics because of the complex work, and that's okay, but that doesn't have to be a distinction average. So we know that, and distinction average doesn't mean a successful lawyer. A successful lawyer has commercial insight, they're creative thinking, they think outside the box, they are happy to be flexible and agile and work across different groups and try different industries. So, academics is one small component, but really, it is really one component of what we look for. And even with things like the programs we do now with First Nation students, we don't even ask for your academics. So we've changed and it has moved on, incredibly. And now we also, I know we talked about the industry, but and partnerships with universities. We spend a lot of time talking to universities about how they teach, so that when it's not necessarily about us dictating, we need a certain type of lawyer. For me, it's understanding how the law schools teach, so that then when people arrive at my firm or any firm, we know then also how to train them. So it's really a two-way stream, and the academics, when you think about it, is when you're thinking about how you train someone, is irrelevant then, because you're starting with complete unassumed knowledge. So I mean, I'm a bit passionate about it. I think academics are important but not critical, and it's much broader skills that I look for and that I see, in all the graduates we've hired. It's not the academics I remember at all.
Sandee, I want to pick up a couple of points that Sam G mentioned there, and Sam K, I'm coming to you, so be ready, I'm coming. And it's your world. It's where, it's all about what you do every day. But this kind of idea of a multitude of competencies, if you like, that law students need today, multidisciplinary and otherwise, but also this whole notion of the closeness with industry, the breakdown of the barriers between kind of, academic, vocational and continuing education. And I guess in a way, almost the redefining of what it means to be work ready. So how you get work ready, but what it means to be work ready. And what are your thoughts on that, and what are you seeing?
Well, a couple things before I quite get there, sort of going back to this idea of virtual internship. I think one of the issues and why it's such a fabulous thing is sort of what both Sam K and Sam G said. There's only limited number of spots, whether it's, students working for Amica or whether it's folks in the firm. So the idea, it really fills a gap of experience, right? That we have all these fabulous internship, externship, clerkships, whatever you want to call them, programs, but I can't put every student in them, and there aren't those opportunities. So I think that what you're seeing in terms of this set of competencies is that students are going to need this blend of practical and people skills, right? They need cultural awareness and doctrinal knowledge. They have to understand global perspective. They need a mindset for digital business where they're creative problem solvers and customer service sort of oriented. And that's something that law faculty struggle with, because we've been out, even myself, who came prior to being at the law school from AmLaw firms doing in-house professional development, designing curricula and competencies. even for me, who really actively tries to keep up, I'm starting to get removed. And I think it's the challenge of the law school model and what needs to change. And frankly, there's still a fair amount of resistance within the academy, but the new pedagogy is gonna have to instill a level of flexibility and agility and the sort of augmented skills and competencies. So where we at Santa Clara focus with our students is on those competencies that are transferable, so that when practice areas change, students have a core of skills. But that really requires partnering with industry in a way that the academy traditionally hasn't been willing to, but it's something that certainly is passionate to me and I have done throughout, so that we know where to meet. Right? We can't do it all. We've got bar prep and classes and we have a really tough regulator in the ABA who tells us what we can and can't do, what can be digital and what can't be, and how many classes are online. So we need to have some consensus about what we can do well and where we can meet. And there needs to be that sort of economy of scale, because I can't meet every individual firm or company where they want, but we could start to have some shared understanding of where I can deliver students to. I think Sam G's firm and the approach they're taking to hiring and onboarding is admirable. And you're seeing some of that in the States, but it's a both and, right? I would say we still start with rank of school and grades, and then we look at this other skill set. And we haven't quite moved away. So we're not hiring yet entirely for the things that we actually want students to have. But there's huge pressure on law schools, and we're not necessarily responding quickly enough, and we can't keep up. So again, that partnership of just, I would say law schools in my time have moved tremendously to skills and competencies, and really in the scheme of legal education in these last 20 years have made huge strides. The problem is they're still not keeping up with how fast and how complex the legal industry is changing. And I'm not sure we're going to be able to. And so I think that's where partnering really matters, so that we are delivering students with skill sets. But we're going to have to be more accommodating, and we're going to have to be more affordable, and we're going to have to be more mindful on outputs, and not just thinking like a lawyer, but really being able to train students to deliver impactful, timely, responsive, holistic solutions for clients. And that's not yet a mindset that's been widely adapted in legal education, but perhaps COVID and some of the disruption that's happening, and with the partnerships of companies like Tom's will start to move us to a place we need to be. Otherwise, we're going to be disrupted completely.
The critical element in what you were saying, and I think if I'm paraphrasing this correctly, just on this one point for you, Sam G and Tom, is really that work experience in some way, shape or form is critical for law students, and to orientate themselves and understand kind of what they're walking into, I guess, is incredibly important as well, which brings me very squarely to you, Sam K, because you're you're in some respects that person. What are your thoughts about all of this as you're listening to this?
Everything that Sandee was saying is just like, yep. And that's what we're here. We're trying to do, really. It's understanding that law schools can give you as much theoretical knowledge as you like, but until you've picked up the phone and called a client, have you really exercised and used that knowledge? And use those practical skills that are really hard to learn from a book. Like I've spoken to every student, I help guide them through the process of, making their first client call, because at the end of the day, they're their clients. We're just there to help. And they're always so nervous before that first call, and as they exponential growth, really. And it's so rewarding to hear their feedback as well, and listen to how, wow, and these are coming from, third, fourth, fifth year law students that have gone through university, but they haven't, and they've worked in legal roles, be it reception and administration, but until they've actually had to convey legal information, albeit from a lawyer, obviously, to a client, And that's when they come into their own. And it's so rewarding to watch. We're not trying to churn out residential tenancy lawyers. We're trying to churn out people that have those practical communication skills and interpersonal skills to explain the law in layman's terms and really problem solve and strategize and communicate. It's that holistic solution rather than just strictly spitting out legal information. Yep, you have a right to have your window fixed. It's how are we going to get that done? How are you going to communicate and negotiate with your landlord to get that done? How are you going to do that during a pandemic when certain repairs aren't allowed to be performed? And that's really what we're trying to do, get those practical skills that the universities can't teach by themselves.
Absolutely. And I guess one of the things that we've been hearing quite a bit recently is, that one tends to learn a lot by being able to observe, by being, in the courtroom or being, I guess, in a classroom where there's a simulation, or being with the partner who is basically negotiating a matter. And Samjee, I wanted to put this question to you, to all of you, but firstly to you. In the situation where we currently find ourselves, are we able to replicate that, or is there kind of a gap that's growing in that aspect of education that we're going to have to try and make up in some way?
It's a really interesting question, actually, and Tom and I talked a lot about this when we initially designed the first virtual experience program, because we thought about, and we talked a lot to our graduates about, if you sit next to a partner or you sit in the office, what do you gain? So when we wrote the programs, we actually got our graduates heavily involved with regards to the simulations and the different tasks that we put in front of them. And yes, it's not exactly the same as sitting next to a partner, but it was all our partners talking, that they give the instructions. We even, it was so realistic. At one point, one of the partners said something and we went and we filmed it and we thought, my gosh, no one is going to be able to understand that. So we got the solicitor to do the notes, and you actually see the handwritten notes, because that's what life is about, and people don't give the most amazing instructions, but rather than refilming it, we went, no, this is what it is. And so, it's not totally perfect to sitting next to the partner, but we do spend a lot of time taking it back to the business, to the graduates, to students, to say, is this close? Is this what you would do on a daily basis? And I remember one of my favorite stories, when we set up the virtual experience program, we asked Tom obviously to test, and he because it was the first ever virtual experience program, he brought students in and watched them, and he said it was just amazing. And Tom, I'm sorry for telling your story, but after about 20 minutes, he said you could just see people's body change and their face change, and they were like, I'm doing work. I'm really being a graduate, and I can do it. And it gave people a real sense of confidence. And that was what was so nice, because I do think people self-select out of commercial law because they go, either they're looking for that distinction average, or the work's boring, or it's not for me, or I'm not from a GO8 university, and all those things that people do. But when you actually have a go at it and you can do it, and you don't have to be perfect. I mean, we don't assess, our virtual experience program is not assessed. So there's a best practice answer. There's tons of tools along the way. You should make mistakes. You should look at it and you can go back and do it again. I mean, it's about learning. It's about, and you get feedback and you get different comments, and that's what would happen in practice. You take it back and you go, oh no, well, look, that was great, but I probably would have done this. So yes, we can't do that directly, but we really do try. That's a big part of Tom and I spend a lot of time on the phone trying to work that out. How do you skill people up still in the same way, but in a virtual way? So we give it our best shot.
Thank you for that. Sadly, we're going to have to start to wrap up, and it is sad because it's been such an amazing discussion. We started this by calling or titling this session The New Legal Intern. So I'm going to ask all of you this question, and I'm going to hold you to about 30 seconds to a minute in response to it. And the question is this: what's new about internship now? What's different And is it really that new? And Sam K, I'm going to ask you this question first, because I think you're probably thinking about this quite a lot.
Definitely. And I think it comes back to the word that I think we've all said a million times throughout this presentation has been confidence, and kind of getting the skill combined with that confidence and that practical experience to actually exert, oh, I can do this and I know what to do with this, and to experience the situation. So I think that's what we're moving towards. Like in the future, we'll have automation, innovation to kind of do a lot of the legal grunt work. How are we going to solve the EQ problems? How are we going to solve the services that go slightly beyond just legal advice? And I think that that's kind of what we need to do, and having the confidence to kind of move forward into that space.
Absolutely brilliant. Knowledge is kind of a given, right? It's all about experience. So I'm going to go around the circle. Sam G, your thoughts? What's new about the new legal intern?
For me, it's reach. As I said, and you nailed it when you said previously 5% of people could do a clerkship or a physical internship. Now we can offer a virtual experience program to 17,000 students, which was not possible. So for me, it's all about reach and diversity.
Fantastic. Tom, it's got to lead me to you next, right? You are the new legal intern, right?
Yeah, I mean, just going off what Sam said, I think what's new for us is that historically recruitment or like your transition to private practice was get hired and then get trained. And the training happened after the hiring piece. And now that we live in an age of software and technology, you can flip that process around. So you can actually use software and technology to train people first before you hire them. And hopefully it makes intuitive sense, but we believe that that train before you hire is a far more equitable and a far better experience for the candidate, and a far better experience for our corporate partners.
Yeah, fantastic. And Sandee, the last word is going to be with you. And I know that it's a question that you live in and have lived in for a very long time. So what's new with the new legal intern?
Well, I think others have hit on it. What I like to say to my students is expectation, right? That you have to come in with a certain foundational skill set, which goes to what Sam K was talking about with respect to confidence, and it goes to what Sam G's talking about with respect to reach, and what Tom's talking about. So if I come in with some confidence and some fundamental critical skills that aren't necessarily traditional lawyering skills, I'm going to get every opportunity, and that's the expectation. You can't just show up anymore. So what I say, and I think has changed, is that my students can't have the skill set today 6 months from now. They've got to be growing their skill sets all the way through law school, not just when they complete law school. And I think that's what's shifted and what we're working hard to try to think about doing at Santa Clara as we expose them to different types of opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. It's wonderful that we have the opportunity and the technology, not just to discuss the topic today, but to take that discussion across the Pacific Ocean and actually involve a couple of continents in the discussion is just absolutely kind of living in a way what we were all talking about. We're incredibly grateful to you for your time. Folks, sadly, that does bring us to the end of this session today. If you'd like to follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, you'll hear and see lots more of these sessions coming up. For those of you that are in law school at the moment, we know that things are not particularly easy for you, or even folks in practice right now. But there are opportunities that come with all of these things as well. And I hope the discussion today has highlighted in a very realistic and practical way the opportunities that are available. Again, Sam K, Sam G, Tom and Sandee, just an absolute pleasure to have you today, and I can't wait till we have that opportunity to be together again. Until then, keep well and stay safe. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Terri. Thanks.
Thanks, Terri.